At 6, major gains for the Conservatives in England as Britain counts its votes. The biggest prize, Hartlepool, a Labour seat for more than half a century, goes blue. Boris Johnson is there to celebrate with his new MP.
If there's a lesson out of this whole election campaign, the whole local election campaign across the whole of the UK, it's that the public want politicians to get on with focusing on their needs and their priorities.
A shattering day for Labour as the party's leader admits they need to reconnect with working people.
Very often we've been talking to ourselves instead of to the country, and we've lost the trust of working people, particularly in places like Hartlepool. I intend to do whatever is necessary to fix that.
Counting continues for the Scottish Parliament elections with full results not due until tomorrow, but Nicola Sturgeon says she's confident.
The SNP appears to be on course for a 4th consecutive election victory and to be on course to have the privilege of forming a government again.
Also on the programme tonight, the government starts to lift the international travel ban for England, but very slowly. Portugal, Israel and Iceland are among 12 countries you can visit after May the 17th without self-isolating on return. Police investigating the murder of Julia James appealed to the public to help identify this man seen close to where she died. Adults under 40 will be offered an alternative to the AstraZeneca vaccine amid concerns about rare blood clots.
Stay with us on the BBC News Channel for all the election results still to come across Scotland, Wales and England, and analysis of what they mean from our team of experts.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Conservatives are celebrating a major victory in the Hartlepool by-election, with the Prime Minister saying the result is a mandate to continue to deliver, not just for the northeast of England, but for the whole country. Labour's vote fell by 9% in the first electoral test for its leader, Sir Keir Starmer. He called the results bitterly disappointing and said he would do whatever it takes to rebuild trust in the party. The Conservatives made history by winning Hartlepool for the first time in more than 60 years. The Tory candidate, Jill Mortimer, won almost twice as many votes as her Labour rival. She hailed the result as a truly historic moment. The result was the start of a trend that continued in early local council election results across England, with the Conservatives making more gains. In Scotland, where the SNP are aiming to secure an outright majority and further calls for another independence referendum, results so far today suggest it could be an incredibly tight race, coming down to a handful of seats. And in Wales, results have started coming in. The Welsh Conservatives have taken one of their key seats, or key targets, Vale of Clwyd, from Labour, but there's still a long way to go. We'll have the very latest from Scotland and Wales shortly and look at the results in detail. But first, let's go live to Westminster and our political editor, Laura Kuhnsberg.
Sophie, this is not a general election and it's not yet complete. But my goodness, it is already a very, very significant dip of the toe into the waters of public opinion. A huge set of elections, many millions of people casting their ballot in one way or another. And while, of course, we should pay attention to all the individual contests, what's been going on in the different corners of Great Britain, in terms of that big battle at Westminster, that overall shape is clear. The results today so far, a real vindication and victory for Boris Johnson and the government's handling of what's been going on since the general election in 2019, despite all the bumps along the way and despite the pandemic. And for Keir Starmer's Labour Party, a real warning that the thumping in 2019, when Jeremy Corbyn was in charge, may well not be rock bottom. And nowhere was that contrast of fortunes as apparent in that by-election which was announced early this morning. And no surprise, Boris Johnson himself couldn't resist making a visit there today.
Well, look at this guy. He looks a bit like...
Who does he look like? Who else? The Tory Prime Minister, pumped up and inflated to 100-foot high.
Thank you.
With his party taking big strides, trampling over territory Labour used to treat as its own.
You're taking it, yes?
Yes.
Far from an overnight shock, but another step forward in a journey that started long ago.
It's a mandate for us to continue to deliver, for not just for the people of Hartlepool, not just for the people of the North East, but across the whole of the country. The public want politicians to get on with focusing on their needs and their priorities.
The air's gone out of his opponents. One Labour veteran said holding Hartlepool was a test of whether the party could hold its own. It did not here. And the Tories were digging in deeper, taking councils in much of England, like Nuneaton, Dudley, and Harlow and Essex. Little hope on Labour faces that things could be better since the thumping of 2019. Even with a newish leader, maybe things could only get worse.
Well, I'm bitterly disappointed in the results, and, you know, I take full responsibility for the results, and I will take full responsibility for fixing things. We have changed as a party, but we haven't set out a strong enough case to the country.
But a very public battle was underway over where next, even before he spoke. Labour's old opposing generals slugging it out.
It is amazing because Jeremy Corbyn has not been leader of the Labour Party for, a year. And yet here I was in Hartlepool having his name, being bandied around on the doorstep. Honestly, he casts a long shadow still.
Pointing their fingers in opposite directions.
He said he wanted to make the moral case for socialism. He wanted a united party. And unfortunately, he's failed in all of those areas because we're now in a situation, and Hartlepool is the manifestation of it, where people don't know what his vision is.
The local elections aren't just about the two biggest parties' wins and losses. There's been a long list of complex contests too. The Lib Dems picking up pockets of support again. Here in Cambridgeshire, an extra backing for the Lib Dems, and the Greens together edged out Labour from overall control in Sheffield too. But remember, there are many, many results to come. So far, it's Labour in the doldrums, but they expect to keep London and maybe march on in some parts of the south. And whatever happened to the banners in Powys? There has been no big collapse for the party in Wales. Labour's vote holding up, unlike the set.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Yet there's a huge headache for Labour and the Conservatives in Scotland. There's never been a doubt that Nicola Sturgeon's SNP would win this election. What we don't know yet is by how much, or exactly how hard she'll therefore push for another vote on independence soon, and isn't giving that away just yet.
Extremely happy and extremely confident that we are on track in the SNP for a fourth consecutive election victory and to have the ability to form a government again. And that's an extraordinary achievement for any political party.
For all the parties, with many votes not yet counted, there'll be losses unknown to commiserate and victories to celebrate. One Tory in particular, though, needn't wait to cheer. The Mayor of Tees Valley back with an almost unheard of level of support. Nearly 3/4 of all of the votes went his way.
That not only are we the party of the working family, but we are the new party of the North.
Claims that not so long ago would have sounded audacious, fanciful perhaps. But today's results, so far, underline with the real Boris Johnson at the top. It's not so far-fetched now. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, in Scotland, counting is still underway in many of the 129 seats being contested at Holyrood. The signs are that the SNP will be the largest party at Holyrood, but whether they can secure an outright majority won't be known until tomorrow. The outcome of the election there could affect the future of the United Kingdom, as our Scotland editor Sarah Smith reports.
Are we witnessing the dawn of a new chapter in Scottish politics? This election's crucial because the result could well take us one step closer to another independence referendum.
Well done.
Nicola Sturgeon hopes this result will return her as First Minister and give her a mandate to hold another vote on leaving the UK. She's confident of winning the election and that the SNP will have a fourth term in government.
If that is indeed the outcome of this election, I pledge today to get back to work immediately, to continue to steer this country through the crisis of COVID, to lead this country into recovery from COVID, and then, when the time is right, to offer this country the choice of a better future.
The SNP took East Lothian from Labour, but elsewhere there are signs of tactical voting against the SNP in seats like Banff and Buchan Coast, where the Tories came close to victory, while votes for other unionist parties decreased.
The Constitution was put front and centre in this campaign by the SNP and their desire to divide Scotland all over again. But Scottish Conservatives had a clear, ambitious plan for what we can do in the next Parliament if we can get rid of the threat of another independence referendum.
The real question is not who's going to win this election, but how well the SNP perform. The electoral system makes it very difficult for any party to achieve an overall majority. But when you add in seats the Scottish Greens may win, then there could be a pro-independence majority in the next Parliament. So will Westminster recognise that as an electoral mandate for another referendum? A feline interloper was carefully ejected from the count in Orkney before the first Scottish result was declared. In Dumfries, the count was held up after a power cut. Floodlights had to be installed. Anas Sarwar has only been Scottish Labour leader for less than 3 months. In that short time, it appears he's not yet transformed Labour's really poor recent results.
Compared to where we were just 10 weeks ago when I took over this job, it's a magnificent turnaround. But I'm not pretending this journey is complete. I'm not pretending the project to change the Labour Party is complete.
Alex Salmon Cut's a lonely figure these days, and he won't know until tomorrow if he's back into Holyrood with his new Alapa party. The famous Steel Kelpies in Falkirk, a safe SNP seat. This election was always really a one-horse race with the SNP far out in front. But they may need some kind of partnership with the Scottish Greens to forge a case for another vote on Scotland's future. So far we've had 33 seats had their results in Scotland. Only 2 of them have changed hands and both of them are SNP gains. But it is important to say we have to wait until tomorrow till we get all the results, including the regional list results, because they can change the picture quite considerably. But I think it is safe to say for now, at this point, the SNP are by far the happiest party in Scotland.
Sarah Smith, thank you. Well, counting continues in Wales, where Labour has so far lost 1 of its seats to the Conservatives, but remains on course to stay in power. Only a handful of the 60 constituency and regional results have been declared so far. Some may not be announced until tomorrow. Our Wales correspondent Hal Griffith reports.
Through every cycle, every political storm, Labour has held on to power in Wales for 22 years. It may not now reach the same heights as before, but it's in gradual decline, not freefall. COVID dominated the campaign. It changed voting too, with socially distanced queues and a slower daytime count. Ultimately, the crisis may have helped save some Labour seats.
I started this campaign answering questions as to why this was going to be Labour's worst ever result, a poll prediction of 22 seats. The campaign never felt like that to me. We've had a fantastic and energetic campaign with hundreds of people involved and real enthusiasm on the doorstep.
Labour has lost its grip in some parts of Wales. The Vale of Clwyd turned to the Conservatives for the first time, but the Welsh Tory leader doesn't expect large parts of the Welsh map to turn blue.
At the moment, very optimistic. It's looking positive in certain seats for us and on the region as well. But it does look as if obviously many Labour voters have returned to the fold and endorsing some of the work that Mark Drakeford and his government have done through the pandemic.
Seats in the Senedd are switching. Plaid Cymru looks set to lose one of theirs. But the party could yet turn things around. It won't rule out negotiating a deal with Labour.
It's way too early to say, but the one thing that I will say, that's the point of Plaid Cymru, is to strengthen Wales, to make Wales a better place to live for the people of Wales, and we will do that to the best of our ability.
The landscape here is changing. Abolish, a party which wants to shut down the Senedd, could pick up seats. But it will be Welsh Labour at the helm once again, trying to steer their way through the next 5 years. We may not know those final results until tomorrow morning, but a few seats either way could make a big difference, because after the hours of counting could come days, maybe even weeks of negotiations between the parties. At the moment, it seems likely that Labour will need to talk to others in order to strike a deal, in order for it to govern for yet another 5 years.
Hal, thank you. The rest of the news now, and the international travel ban for England will start to be slowly lifted in 10 days' time. Portugal, Israel and Gibraltar are on a list of just 12 green countries that you'll be able to travel to without quarantining on return. Meanwhile, Turkey has been added to the red list for travel, so thousands of fans with tickets for the Manchester City-Chelsea Champions League final there at the end of the month have been told not to go. Here's Caroline Davis.
The beaches of Portugal are one step closer. The green list of countries is out. From the 17th of May, anyone travelling from any of these 12 countries and territories won't need to quarantine when they arrive in England. But that doesn't mean that all of these countries will welcome tourists from the 17th of May. Some, like Australia and New Zealand, will not.
There are only 12 countries and territories on this list. Many passengers will be very disappointed by that, as will the industry. Why are there so few?
We are having to be cautious about this initially. We don't want to overturn all the brilliant work of, frankly, the British people in taking these vaccines and staying at home and all of that pain. And so we can't do anything to put that at risk.
3 countries have also been added to the red list from 4 a.m. on Wednesday, including Turkey, where the Champions League final is due to take place later this month. The government has confirmed talks are happening to bring it to the UK and said fans shouldn't travel there. There was relief in Portugal. Miguel Campina runs a restaurant in the Algarve.
Well, this is an absolutely amazing news, and we must say, on behalf of the Algarve in Portugal, we must say thank you.
But with the virus still circulating, some think reopening international travel is still too great a risk.
Especially the poor nations have not even got going with their vaccination program. So we've got to get that program going, suppress the infections before we say, look, international travel is now considerably safer.
More countries will be added or removed from the list every 3 weeks, and the government say that those fully vaccinated will be able to show their status on the NHS app from the 17th of May. For now, travel to most of the world is still not possible, but more is promised, just over the horizon. Caroline Davis, BBC News.
Well, the latest coronavirus figures show 2,490 new infections in the latest 24-hour period, meaning an average of 2,060 new cases per day in the last week. 15 deaths were reported in the latest 24-hour period. 12 deaths were announced on average every day in the past week. 127,598 people have now died. As for vaccinations, more than 35 million people have now had their first COVID jab, and more than 16.5 million people are now fully vaccinated. Well, adults under the age of 40 will be offered an alternative to the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine because of concerns over rare blood clots. The under 30s were already being offered a different jab. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh reports.
The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is the main workhorse of the NHS immunisation campaign and highly effective at preventing serious COVID infection. But unlike the Pfizer and Moderna jabs, it's been linked to a rare clotting disorder. 28.5 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine have been given in the UK up to the last week of April. There have been 242 cases of rare blood clots combined with low platelet levels, almost all after the first shot. The overall incidence is 1 in 100,000 doses, but the risks are higher for those in their 30s, where it rises to 1 in 60,000 doses. There have been 49 deaths in total. That's 2 deaths per 1 million doses of vaccine. Falling infection rates means the threat to the under 40s from COVID is now so small that the potential risk from the AstraZeneca vaccine to this age group looms larger. So where possible, they'll be given a different jab.
We offer this advice, which places a high priority on safety in the hope that it will further increase vaccine confidence. so that those of us who are being offered a vaccine in the coming weeks can feel more confident and feel more able to step forward, accept the offer of a vaccine.
The NHS is still on target to offer every adult a first dose by the end of July, and vaccines remain the key to ending the pandemic.
They have already saved over 10,000 British lives. But actually the greater value of these vaccines is the lives they will save in the future by keeping the disease under long-term control. And that is why we must finish the job.
The under-40s play a key role in transmission of coronavirus, so vaccination will protect them in any third wave and protect the vulnerable even more. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Dozens of people had to be rescued from a tower block in East London this morning after a fire broke out and spread over 3 floors. The flats are partially covered in cladding similar to the type used at Grenfell Tower. More than 30 people needed medical treatment for smoke inhalation. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons reports.
Help, help! For people in flats with fire safety issues, this is the nightmare. It's open! But at 9 this morning, it's what confronted residents.
As I opened the door to leave my flat, that's when I bumped into one of the security guards running up, screaming that there's a fire, get out. And he was sweating, and I could clearly tell that this was serious, it wasn't a drill.
120 firefighters tackled the flames and rescued residents, some suffering from the effects of the smoke. The fire spread 3 floors of a building which has silver cladding, identified as a risk. Experts believe it is likely to be combustible, and work to start removing it was due to begin in the coming weeks. But that's after a delay of more than 3.5 years since it was first identified as a problem.
This could happen again. We need to get this cladding off buildings as soon as possible. Not waiting around for finance, not waiting around for new bills to go through government. Get it off, keep us all safe. There are hundreds of thousands of people that are affected by this.
The government said a subsidiary of the building's owner, Ballymore, had consistently failed to take action. Public money's been earmarked to speed things up, including £8 million for work here. But flat owners will have to find another £3.5 million between them. Tom Simons, BBC News, East London.
Police are appealing to the public to help identify a man who was seen close to where the police community support officer Julia James was killed. They've released a photograph that was taken in Kent the day after the 53-year-old died. She was found dead in Ackhold Woods near her home 10 days ago. A post-mortem revealed she died from significant head injuries. Helena Wilkinson reports.
Who is this man? Detectives desperately need to know. They say he could be the key to unlocking what happened to Julia James.
Somebody knows who that man is. We desperately need you to make contact with us and help us identify who that person is. If that person is watching, please make contact with us. We believe that you have crucial information.
The man in the image that police have released today was spotted somewhere along this country lane in Aylsham last Wednesday, the day after the body of Julia James was discovered. This is an area that's not far from the crime scene. Where the photograph came from or who took it, police won't say. Julia James had been walking her dog when she was attacked. Just a few hundred yards from her home, she suffered significant head injuries. Her husband posted this photograph of them both, saying how much he missed her. A reward of up to £10,000 has been offered by Crime Stoppers for information leading to a conviction in this case. Officers from forces across the country have now been asked to support Kent Police on what continues to be a challenging case for them. On the 10th day of this investigation, they're hoping they're getting closer to the breakthrough they need. Helena Wilkinson, BBC News, Aylsham in Kent.
Let's go back now to the elections. And the first big result of the day came early this morning when Hartlepool elected a Conservative MP for the first time in decades, with almost double the number of votes of Labour. A shadow minister called the result absolutely shattering. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has been finding out why, after so long, the town has gone blue.
As the sun came up on the northeast coast, the news came in.
Jill Mortimer, Conservative Party candidate, is duly elected.
After decades of Labour, Hartlepool awoke to a Tory MP.
Through this result, the people have spoken.
These early swimmers had sensed a shift coming. When we met them before the election, they'd been ready for waves.
Everybody in Hartlepool's always voted Labour, and it's just a change now because we've seen a brighter future.
My poor dad would turn over in his grave because he was a staunch Labour supporter. But there you go.
Jeff's been unconvinced by successive Labour leaders.
They allowed themselves the indulgence of Corbyn, but for ordinary people, it frightened the horses. Big Star, that scared me. When Starmer and the likes came up here, nobody knew what the message was. I don't even think they knew what the message was.
Paul, once a shop steward, now an active Tory supporter, lost faith in Labour over years.
In Hartlepool, it just didn't do anything. It just relied on the fact that they had a block vote that was unchallenged, and it's taken a long time, I think, for people to start to realise that we were just taken for granted, and it's a tragedy.
This goes beyond Hartlepool. Labour's bond with what was the party faithful has been loosening over time. Support's eroded in towns and concentrated in cities. The reasons both complex and contested, but in areas that backed Leave, Brexit's clearly played a part. And for many, he's been a catalyst.
S-class. Big Boris, isn't he?
This was the victory tour today.
Is he going to buy all fish and chips? Everybody.
His party has pledged this town big investment, and expectations are high.
People here say they've taken a chance on the Tories. He'll have to keep his promises to them if he's to keep their support. The challenge for Labour is much greater. They have to understand why people switched and respond if they're to find a way back to Downing Street.
There is awareness of the struggle ahead here. This former Labour MP lost his seat in nearby Sedgefield at the general election.
People in the past have called them, and probably still do, the left behind communities, which is a phrase I hate, because they haven't been left behind. They've moved on. It's the Labour Party that's being left behind because they're not speaking the language of the local people, and we need to regain that if we're going to win an election again.
The lines on the political map have blurred and shifted. Labour's fate depends on the course it now takes. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Hartlepool.
Well, let's get a final thought from our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, in Westminster. Up to 40 million people could have voted in Britain. We won't get the results for some time yet, but your assessment so far?
Well, Sophie, as you suggest, there's tons still to come, but two big things I think observing tonight. First of all, in the last couple of weeks, Boris Johnson's had a pretty tough time in Westminster, in the Palace of Parliament over my shoulder. But in the last 24 hours, millions of voters have reminded him and reminded that place that for millions of them, he's a real magnet. He has significant appeal to people in plenty of the country. The flip side, Keir Starmer's had a couple of weeks round here where the Labour Party was setting some of the agenda. They felt they were putting the Tories under pressure. But then millions of voters in the last 24 hours have given the verdict that actually the Labour brand right now isn't something that they really want to be dallying with. And the second thing that I think is worth just underlining is what we've seen is another confirmation of a shift that's been going on for quite some time. Brexit was part of it, but maybe a symptom too of a change that was underway. Those blurring of the lines. What we were hearing from Alex there from Hartlepool, from voters, that Labour has lost touch with people who used to vote them over years and years. This isn't something that has changed overnight. And for the Conservatives, really quite a deliberate strategy that they've been pursuing again for some time to try to get into territory where not so long ago they would have been real outsiders. It might even have seemed far-fetched that they would be able to plant blue flags in places that they now see as being part of a new natural home. There is plenty more to come though in the coming days. The map is not yet complete from these results. Big headaches ahead for both the big unionist parties, probably in terms of those Scottish results. But those two observations playing strongly to the Conservatives, who will feel very much that the choices they've made in recent times have been vindicated by millions of voters today.
Laura Kuensberg in Westminster, thank you. Let's have a look at the weather now with Nick Miller. What's the weekend looking like?
Well, Sophie, after a day of sunshine and showers today,
It's all changed for tomorrow, but stand by for this. Low pressure bringing not just showers, a spell of heavy rain spreading north. The wind picking up, but the wind coming in from a warmer direction. So actually, despite the rain, temperatures will be heading up. But don't confuse these colours with sunshine. There won't be much of that until sunny spells return on Sunday. Now, the heavy showers today in eastern Scotland, northeast England fade this evening. Then we look to the rain coming in from the southwest, from that area of low pressure, covering much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland by morning. Still clear enough for long enough, though, in Scotland, northern and eastern parts of England for another frost before temperatures gradually head up later in the night. So the rain tomorrow spreading north. It'll be heavy, difficult travel conditions. In Scotland, it'll gradually move in, not reaching the Northern Isles until the evening, but drying up a little bit in southern Scotland in the afternoon. Northern Ireland brighter in the afternoon and getting drier in southern England and East Anglia. But even at this stage of the day, still raining in northern England and Wales. It'll be a windier day. It is turning warmer from the south, but another rather cold day in Scotland and still some snow to the higher hills. And a word about the rain in Wales that continues into the evening. In the Brecon Beacons, the wettest spots here could see over 100 millimetres of rain, so that could bring some disruption. And jumping ahead to the temperatures first thing on Sunday, they're on a par with what we've had by day in the past week or so, so it is going to feel quite different out there. But there's still low pressure close by with heavy showers on Sunday in Northern Ireland and Scotland. A few showers in Wales, an area of rain and patchy cloud moving through England. But ahead of that, some warm sunny spells for perhaps a time in East Anglia and South East England before the chance of a thunderstorm later in the day. But don't get too carried away with some 20s on the map. The temperatures come down a little bit again next week. Sophie.
Of course they do. Nick, thank you very much. That's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.